Welcome to the Empower LEP Podcast. I'm your host, Jana Parker. I'm a licensed educational psychologist, group practice owner, and mentor at Empower LEP. Today, I have a really great conversation with Dr. Brandi Tanner, who is a clinical psychologist in Atlanta, Georgia, but she was a school psychologist. Then she first she was a special education teacher. Then she became a school psychologist. Then she decided that she wanted to get into private practice. So she did that for a while as a psychologist. And then she transitioned into being an advocate. And so she does advocacy, but also beyond just kind of one-on-one advocacy, she also has a whole platform called Your IEP Source. And she supports families. She has workshops. She has a membership program. And it's all to help empower families with information so they feel more informed going into their IEP meetings. And yeah, she's built a whole practice around this. And so now she's not being a psychologist any longer. She's not seeing clients that way, but she does have this advocacy practice. And now she's able to support families from anywhere. So listen in. Dr. Brandi Tanner is really inspiring and talks all about her transitions and her business and her guidance for educators and people thinking about doing something different with their lives. And as always, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Welcome back to the Empower LEP Podcast. I'm here with Dr. Brandi Tanner. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I found Dr. Tanner on the Testing Psychologist, and she had given a really nice response to a question that was asked in the Facebook group. And I was like, who is this person, Dr. Brandi Tanner? And I just kind of went on a little search to look you up, and I was like, oh, she's doing some really cool stuff. So Dr. Tanner is in Atlanta, Georgia. And she has a business called Your IEP Source. And so I really want to get into what that is, but I first just really want to hear about your history, kind of where you started, to give our listeners some insight into, your beginnings of your professional career. This episode is brought to you by Empower LEP, the #1 resource for aspiring and practicing LEPs with courses, trainings, and mentorship opportunities. I've recently launched an LEP Practice Essentials course, which is self-paced and designed to get your practice up and running, streamlining those administrative processes, implementing effective management strategies, and ensuring compliance with legal and ethical standards. I go into the components of choosing an EHR, HIPAA basics, setting up email and phone lines, collecting payments, tracking leads, developing standard operating procedures, and more. This is really the course that I wish I had when I started my practice, but instead of you having to think about all of these components yourself, I have just done it for you. There are a ton of ready-to-use resources in this course. Check it out at empowerlep.com/LEP-practice-essentials.
So my professional career, I started out as a special education teacher, taught special ed for a while, and then got really interested in why is this student in my class and that student's not in my class, and why are you this eligibility category and not that one? So I decided to go back and study school psychology. I, still liked working in schools at that time, just wanted to have a little bit different position. So went to USF, got my doctorate degree, and then came back to Atlanta and worked in the schools for a while as a school psychologist. After some time, I started realizing that I'm not very good at following rules. I felt like there was a lot of just fill out this log just because, or just sit in this meeting, even though you have 10 reports that you need to be writing and things like that. And just kind of the bureaucracy of it, we have to do it this way because we always have. And then on a personal level, some of the students that I worked with, I felt like even though I was testing them to get special services, I didn't always feel like they were making the best plan that they could for that student. So after a while, I decided that I needed to transition out of that. So My first business was actually, I went into private practice as a psychologist and did a lot of psychological evaluations, but other private practitioners that did not have a school background asked me a lot of questions like, Brandi, we know that this student has ADHD or has dyslexia or has autism, whatever the diagnosis was, but they didn't know the red tape rules and procedures about how to get them an IEP. So the questions kept coming from my fellow clinicians. And I was like, wait a minute, I think there's an actually bigger need than what I realized. So that's how I founded your IEP Source to help families understand how to navigate special ed and 504s. So that's kind of where it all came from the beginning.
Yeah, awesome. So how long did you work in private practice before you started shifting? And do you still work in private practice, or you're just doing your IEP Source now?
I haven't given an IQ test in about a year. So it was a transition over time. I went into private practice in 2014 and did that solidly up until 2018. And then I started making a shift, officially formed your IEP Source, started putting some marketing out there. And really, it was a lot of word of mouth at the beginning, just local professionals and families that I had worked with sharing the news with each other. During COVID, of course, everything went everywhere. And I was like, it doesn't really have to be just only people that are here local. And I started doing some webinars, workshops, I have a membership program, things like that, so that I could share information with other people. And the aspect of being location independent, you don't have to be sitting in a room with somebody. It really expanded in 2020. So kind of a gradual backing off testing and now going more full-time into advocacy and helping families and also private clinicians, school staff understand how they can work together at the IEP table, just in favor of the student from all sides, no matter how you're looking at the case.
Yeah, I love that. And I know you in your background, it says, you've been a player in so many ways at the IEP table. How do you think that that has helped impact how you do your advocacy practice now?
I'd like to think of every case that I become a part of as being broken down into three distinct parts. And some people at the table are focusing more heavily than others. Um, I look at the clinical information. What is your diagnosis? What are the best interventions or strategies to use based on your clinical profile? I look at the clerical piece of things. What type of paperwork do we need to do to get you those services? And then the piece that I feel a lot of people don't give enough emphasis to is the communication piece.
Mm.
Some people come in way too hot. Like we're coming in making demands and, it's my way or the highway. And that doesn't make for a good team relationship. Or some people come in to me, they're like, can I please have this? And I'm like, your child really needs this. We need to, advocate a little bit more forcefully for the things that they need. So between all of those things, the clinical aspects, the clerical pieces with the paperwork and the rules, and then communication, I tried really hard to get everybody on the same page in that we're trying to find out what does this student need and how can we get it for them.
Mm-hmm.
So different people tend to look at it from different perspectives. Parents are often coming in with, this is my child, I want to get them the best possible services that I possibly can, which that's admirable. We want that. We want every child to have the right services. A lot of times I feel like people that are working in a school setting, we obviously know a lot of them are overworked, they're understaffed, they might be battling their own burnout. There can sometimes be a tendency to become depersonalized because you're looking at it like this is more paperwork, this is another case, and kind of forgetting the child aspect of it. And then the other piece, like I said, a lot of my referrals have come from private clinicians and they're not understanding, well, my therapy client or my testing client very much needs these services. So why is it so hard to get them? So getting those different people to understand the perspectives of the other people that are sitting at the table kind of gets us all on that level playing field of how can we all work together to support this student.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have found that as a previous school psychologist, I think that our expertise in that ability to help families really understand just kind of like the whole IEP system, special education system and how it works and runs. It's a total enigma for people who haven't been there before. And our expertise in that area really helps to alleviate some anxiety and empowers families with knowledge that I think is really unique to us as school psychologists, just exactly like you're talking about. A lot of people who have worked in different kinds of settings who do similar kinds of testing, whether they're in a hospital setting or in a private practice, but they've never worked in a school and they've never worked within the system. Yeah, it's really confusing for those clinicians. It's also, obviously really confusing for parents. So I love doing meetings where we're just kind of helping parents understand that system, which, and then in my practice, we try to empower them with the knowledge to go in and problem solve with their team as well as they can, because we also know as school psychologists that the second you bring somebody else into the room with you, flags go up, people get defensive. And so we do our best to help inform parents about things and try to help them, navigate things from behind the scenes. But then there are definitely families who need someone to be there with them. And then we refer out for advocacy support. So,
Yeah. I have a lot of families that, just do my workshops or my membership, and I answer questions behind the scenes for them. And then there are cases where it's like until somebody else comes in and shows up and sits at the table, they're having a lot of difficulty or spinning their wheels. And something else that you mentioned before, just not knowing the lingo of how special education works and what those rules and procedures are. I frequently find myself having conversations with people about, well, I've had a career in this field for 20 years. That's why I know all of this stuff. Whatever your job is, I'm sure you're an expert in it, but this is not something that you do all day, every day. So we wouldn't expect you to have that level of knowledge. So we just kind of try to fill people in so they can understand this is the process, this is what's happening, so that when they walk in, they know what to expect and they're not walking in at a disadvantage because they don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that just brings up a really good point too. I was just thinking about how when I was a school psychologist and I was working with all these different special education teachers, kind of going back to what you were saying at the very beginning, like special education teachers don't know a lot about special education law a lot of the time, right? So the school psychologists often get to go to legal trainings and learn different things about the special education system, but teachers a lot of times don't get to go to a lot of that kind of training, yet they're participating in this system that maybe they don't even understand. Like, why does this student have this, eligibility and this one doesn't? Or why do I have this kid in my class and not that one? Or why isn't there are so many questions, and not just from the parents. I would say that a lot of people who work within the educational system don't have a lot of insight into how things work legally either.
Right. I feel like that's the case. And when I attend meetings with families as an advocate, that often means that that district is going to send a supervisor, coordinator, director, somebody that is in a supervisory position for that district. And a lot of times you can tell it becomes an education session for the school-based people because that information has not trickled down because they sent that district staff person. That's how the new information, new ideas, new programs, things like that are getting into that school because they're just not making it down to the day-to-day level all the time.
Right, right. Great points. Okay, so take me into when you were leaving the school, because a lot of the listeners are, just thinking about like, well, I work in a school, like, would I ever not work in a school? What was it like for you in that transition of I'm working in a school, but you know what, I'm going to go transition to private practice?
Well, before we hit record, I told you that I was very jealous of you in California that have the LEP. We don't have that. Here in Georgia, we have to become fully licensed as a psychologist. So I started taking my EPPP and making a plan for how I could get my postdoc hours, because when I graduated, I originally assumed that I would just stay working in schools forever. So I hadn't taken those additional steps that were needed for licensure. So during that transition time, I spent a whole summer in Starbucks reading that EPPP book to pass that test. Then I found a way to get my postdoc hours lined up, and there were several different things that came into play. It was, if you go into private practice, you're probably going to have a variable income, whereas here you are now and you get set paychecks every month, which,
Right.
There's a plus to that. And then, you have a pension here, and you will not have that if you switch to the private side of things. There are some things that made me want to stay because, pensions and paychecks are very comfortable. But at the end of the day, I remember going in for the first day of pre-planning in year 4, which was my last year. And it was just like that movie Groundhog Day. And I was just like, I've heard this for the past 3 years. I was like, do I want to hear this for 26 more years? I was like, I just cannot do it. So I was like, okay, you've been a waitress before, so you know how to work with a variable income. If you just stack your coins in a different way, you don't need a pension, you can fund your own retirement. So it was kind of some mindset shifts, and then also the actions that I needed to do to be able to have a job outside of a school setting. So it came about over some time to make those things work.
Yeah. Yep. I love that. Okay. And so you took the leap, you worked in private practice for a while, and then you started to form your IEP source. And how did that idea, well, you told me how it started, but how did it actually, what were the first steps you took to start doing that kind of work? And tell me kind of what's your mission, who is your target audience, and take me through kind of how this has morphed into direct work. Now you're doing a membership and trainings for parents. I want to hear all about it.
So it started out, I was just doing consultation on the side of my private practice. A family would come to me and say, hey, we need help with this upcoming school meeting. Can you help us? And then, like I said, it gradually started being more and more people coming and asking specifically for that service. I talked to a business attorney about the implications of this work is kind of different from my actual psychology work. And he suggested that I split them out into 2 different businesses, because the IEP consulting was not really the same as work that was attached to my license. So it was like, I don't want some rogue IEP meeting to make a parent mad, and then they tried to come against my whole psychology license, even though while they're related, it's not the same thing because I'm not doing clinical work with you. So I officially separated out the businesses, and it started primarily with me doing one-on-one work with families. Someone would contact me letting me know, we have this IEP or 504 meeting coming up. Can you help us prepare for the meeting? Can you go to the meeting with us? So it was primarily that at the beginning. And then, like I said, when COVID came around and a lot more people were doing webinars and things like that, it was like, hey, people outside of my neighborhood here in Atlanta or outside of Georgia can still use some of the same information. I mean, some of the minutia of the laws are slightly different state to state, but the big picture ideas, anyone in any state can use that information. So it became kind of, rather than just only being able to help a small handful of families at a time, I actually have a webinar this evening and we've got 100 people registered. So if
That's
we can
amazing.
help all of those families and get the information out to more people, then it's going to help more kids in the end. So we kind of started trying to go a little bit more broad to help more families and have a bigger impact.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so what kinds of, well, is it just you in your?
It's just me. I have a couple of virtual assistants that do some of my back end tech work. At the very beginning, I did learn how to do it all myself so that I know, how everything works on the back end. But when I look at my time, it's, better for me to spend my time doing, my clinical work or planning out new content to share with people than it is going in the back end and programming emails to be sent and things like that. So For the most part, solopreneur all day, every day, but just a little bit of help on some back end tech work type of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Um, would you say that the majority of your business now is coming from like, are you doing still a lot of one-on-one work and going into meetings with families, or are you finding more like the kind of platform membership, webinar kinds of things are taking up more of your time?
I had to put the brakes on the number of one-on-one clients that I was taking because it had got to the point I was like, this is the max caseload of what I can manage at one time. So I still had people calling me for help, and I didn't want to say, sorry, we're full. So that's kind of where the idea for the membership program came out of, that was because I realized that I was getting at capacity with my one-on-one services. And beyond just the capacity issue, there are families that we don't need, like a full-fledged, you know, former school psychologist as an advocate coming to the meeting. Both, we don't need that level of support just because our issue is not that dire or that serious. Or then also the financial implications of it, the amount that it would cost for me to work with you one-on-one and come to a meeting. I broke down into the workshops and the membership so that I can get the information out to people in a way that's accessible and at a much lower price point. So you can still get help from me, even though I'm not going to your meetings with you. And it's not going to completely break the bank at the end of the day if that's not the level of service that you need. So
Mhm.
I like having those different layers of, if you need me to come to the meetings with you, that's available. But if you need something in the middle for some kind of behind the scenes support, then that's there for you as well.
Awesome, awesome. And tell me what kinds, like when people sign up for a membership on your site, what do they get?
So when I started my membership program 2 years ago, and at that time, I was putting a new training into the membership every month. So I would teach a workshop live on different topics. Some of the topics that I've covered before are things like, the most watched ones are FBAs, behavior plans, and manifestation, because somebody always comes on my website at midnight looking for that and finds it. Then I have some that are about evaluations, just how to prep for a meeting, how to reevaluations work. So basically, over the last 2 years, I filled it up with, these are the main questions that I get all the time. So all of those workshops are available on demand. As soon as you sign up, you have access to all of them. We also have office hours Q&A sessions, so opportunities for people to come in with, hey, this is what I've got going on this week or this month, my upcoming meeting, these are the questions that I have, how am I going to prepare for it? So we've switched more into, instead of doing a lot of loading up with training, we're now in the phase of, all these trainings are here. I can tell you which ones are most pertinent to your case. We're going to get into, what are the questions that you have that I can assist you with. And a lot of people, if they've come for multiple sessions, start to realize, like, hey, I've seen this parent here before. I know she has a case similar to mine. So sometimes people can get their questions answered from each other as well. So that's really good to see also.
That's awesome. Do you have kind of like a community chat in the membership platform where parents get to talk to each other, or?
I, I do have that. It's not as active as I'd like for it to be, but
Okay.
it's usually when we're on the calls that people recognize, like, we've seen you here before, and we recognize that we're kind of in a similar situation.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you learn how to market? And what are you doing primarily to get the word kind of spread across the nation?
Um, Marketing is its own beast, and it's one of those things, when you own a business, you realize, yeah, supposedly my title is psychologist or advocate, but there's a whole nother side of running the business that takes way more time than you'd ever imagine that it does before you try to do it. Um, Over time, I went really heavy on social media marketing for a while, and I was surprised. I don't think that it had the impact that I was expecting for it to. When I look at my stats about where do most people come from, they're coming from a Google search. I've got several blog posts that are ranking really high. The one that you saw, school versus private evaluations, manifestations, FBAs, those are pulling in several hundred people per month. And then they come on my website. You get a pop-up for, here's a free 20-page guide that I wrote to help families new to IEPs. They get on my email list, and then gradually they're coming into the membership or signing up for one-on-one services. So kind of a mix of social media, word of mouth, SEO, Google search type of stuff. So Google is probably still number one, and then half and half between the word of mouth and the social media now.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you know anything about SEO as you were building things out to be recognized on Google? Did you have any help with that?
When I was working on building my psych testing practice, I worked with the people at Counseling Wise because they make websites that are specifically for mental health professionals for how to rank in Google. So I followed their workshops, just self-teaching type of stuff for a while. And then I was like, that's it. Let me just have them redo the website because I don't have time for that. And I had a huge jump in the number of people that were coming on that site after they redid it. So then when I started your IEP Source, I kind of took, okay, I know blanket enough about SEO to try to rank for some of these terms. And over the years, it's been steadily growing. It doesn't happen fast, but over time, you start to get authority and rank higher for different terms.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. How do other professionals use you? Like how would, if listeners are, I guess, anywhere in the country, obviously, like if you're a school psychologist, you're not going to be recommending advocates, but I would say that you probably have a lot of really good information just to, like, I would frame it like there are some free resources that you can get as a family to learn about the IEP process. And then for people who are in private practice, obviously, like we are more likely to to be like, do this. But yeah, like how do you work with professionals? How should people use you?
I get a lot of referrals from professionals that are realizing I can talk about the clinical side of what's going on with this case, but they need help getting through this school paperwork. So they will refer clients to me so that they can become educated about the process. Or sometimes some of my main referral sources that I share a lot of cases with back and forth, sometimes a family will come into me for advocacy and I realize you need updated testing. So then it becomes kind of a circular, we're giving referrals back and forth to each other. Sometimes it's also just information directly for the providers. People that do testing will sometimes be like, what do I need to write in this report to help this child get services? How do I need to word this?
Yeah.
Or those types of things. So that's the interaction that I have with professionals pretty often. And then there's also been what I feel like in the past couple of years, an explosion of people that have decided that they are also done with working in public schools and maybe they were a teacher or a school psychologist and they want to become an advocate. So people have been contacting me for help with that type of stuff recently also. So when there's 28 hours in a day, then I'll start working on that. So
I completely understand. Yeah, I'm like, I have my Empower LEP group and I am doing exactly that, like trying to find enough time in the day to like support everybody through this business while also really managing my like real business, not real, but they're both real businesses, but like, my brick and mortar business. So it's tough. I'm
yeah,
still trying to find those extra 3 hours in the day.
right.
Um, are you thinking about expanding your practice to be more than you, or in terms of the professionals doing the advocacy and the work, or are you sticking to solopreneur?
I am sticking to solopreneur for now. I have some good referral networks of if I'm at capacity for working with people one-on-one. I've got some people that I'm like, if you need behavior, go to so-and-so. If you need dyslexia, go to so-and-so. So, I feel like I've got a good network of people that I can refer out to if I'm not able to help somebody one-on-one. At one point in time, I thought about growing my psych practice, and I had some associates that were working with me for a while, but managing people is a whole nother beast in and of itself. And so, like, when those people were done, I was kind of like, I think I'm done with that too. So I'm gonna roll with this for a while. Just doing it on my own with just some virtual assistants to help.
Yeah, yeah. And since you are really kind of scaling your business so that a lot of it is happening without you having to do the things every day, right? Like if you have an online platform, then things can happen without you having to do all the things. So that's a really nice way to be scaling that as well.
I love it. I have a lot of behind the scenes automations so that things happen without me pressing buttons or doing things. And it's very easy and I like that a lot. So
Yeah, for sure. Um, so in terms of like what would you say to people who are thinking about doing something potentially different from what they're doing now? What guidance might you give somebody, or what kinds of things would you want people to consider? And this could be like, things to encourage them, and also, things that are challenging, and make sure that they think about before they step out.
I think some of the first things that someone should think about is making sure that you are I mentioned before, like I had to kind of get in the mind frame of you're switching from a salaried position with a lot of very stable and steady things to you're switching to something that, while it can be very rewarding, is not always as steady or stable. So, kind of getting your mind around that. And if that requires doing a slow transition until you're completely ready for that, to look at that route. When you are ready to start doing something different, the things that I like to think about first are what is it that's unique about you? Why would we want to buy this service or whatever it is that we're offering from you, and how you're going to position yourself and what your messaging is going to be so that you can get clients to work with you. And then from there, what you're going to offer, why you're the person to offer it so that you can package it up nicely for marketing purposes, getting your minimum viable product. What are you going to be able to put on the table? It will probably go through some, different iterations as you work the bugs out of it. But what are you going to start with so that you have a starting point? You can see how it goes and what changes you need to make. So, I guess to kind of come back full circle on that, like get your mindset right about it. Decide, are you able to make a quick leap from something very stable to something that's potentially not as stable? Do it slowly in a transition. If you're not ready to completely make that leap all at once, there's no shame in that. And then figuring out what's unique about you and what you can offer to people through your unique lens that will make it sound good to them so that they want to work with you.
Yeah. I love that. It's everything that you just said goes across like whatever it is that they're doing. It's like universal guidance. And I completely agree. I couldn't agree more. How much are you loving what you do every day? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like, I am just so in love with what I'm doing with my life, with your career.
I am happy now because there are a lot of things that really work in my favor. I like having a flexible schedule. It was a friend's birthday on Sunday, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, I had meetings on Monday, and I don't like Monday meetings." Well, I don't schedule Monday meetings. I just don't do it. Like my calendar's like not available for scheduling that day, and I realize that's a luxury that I probably wouldn't have if I wasn't working for myself. I like that I am about 95% location independent. if it's a family that's here in my area, I like to go to IEP meetings with my clients face to face, actually at the school in person. But I do have some clients other places in the state. It's not feasible for me to drive to South Georgia because it's too far. So we do some of the meetings virtually, but except for actually sitting in somebody's IEP meeting at their school, everything else, I could do that work from anywhere. So that makes things a lot easier too. If I need to travel or if there's other things that I need to do, just that flexibility of, like, I'm going to try something new and, I can stagger the time how I want, that it makes things really, really easy to work with. And then the work that I'm doing with families, I feel very proud about it because families will let me know I've never heard something explained in that way, or I didn't understand why when I went to the school I thought I was asking for the right thing, but I didn't know, like I needed to say some different words or phrase it differently. And people are getting help and support for their kids that they didn't know how to get before. So I feel good about that. So we're in a good place now.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I mean, I think you're just doing really incredible work and helping so many people, both professionals and families. That whole piece that you were just talking about like just being able, I think when I worked in private practice, I realized it made me a better school psychologist because only in working in a population where they're not at your school did I realize that how much parents didn't know, so now as I'm training interns, because in my private practice, we actually have a contract with a school district where we support their interns, which has been pretty cool. Because we're connected, but we're like not school employees. So we're just teaching them how to be good school psychologists. And I really talk to them about making sure that they're explaining the process as they take families through the process, being really transparent and asking questions like, does this make sense to you? Or do you understand what this is? Because so many times people come to an IEP meeting and they go, okay, well, here I'm going to talk about the psychoed report. And parents are kind of like, okay, and then they just sit there and listen for 45 minutes or something to people talking about the report, but they don't really sometimes even understand why they're doing that, right? Like every meeting should start out with this is why we're here today. This is what we're going to accomplish. This is the order we're going to accomplish it in because this is why. Just there's so much that I think just school psychologists can do, but we start to get into that monotony because we're so used to it. We're so used to the language and the lingo. And for a lot of times, especially with initials, is our family's first times in this. And even when it's not, they don't really even understand necessarily why there is a triennial. Like, well, why
Right.
are we doing this? I had a parent ask me that once, like they want to test them again. And, like it's been 3 years and they want to do it again, and I'm like, oh, right. Because that's actually just how it works. And this is why, they're, okay. Right. They need some explanation and transparency.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the missing piece a lot of times. A lot of what I do in my current work is just before the meeting, talking to the parent about this is what you should probably expect in an eligibility. This is what you should expect in an annual review. And walking in, just having an idea of what's going to be on the table makes them feel a lot more at ease. And then when I attend with families, I'm not really contributing a lot of clinical information to the discussion. When I'm at a meeting, it's usually, have you explained to Miss Jones, like what FAPE is? Have you explained, like what's an FBA or what's a BIP or what your other alphabet soup means? And it's mainly just slowing down the meeting so that the parent can understand because they've been talked over and they don't know where they are in the process.
Yeah. And just think if, I mean, I don't want to put you out of business or anything, but just think if all school psychologists were talking about, I'm just kidding. There's no way you're going out of business.
I I always tell my clients it's my goal to graduate them so they don't need me to, like go to meetings or be one-on-one with them anymore. So knowledge is power. And if we get this information in people's hands so that they know what to ask for and what to speak up for in the name of the student, it's going to help everyone. And if you really dig down into it, helping students be successful helps everyone, because if we graduate a generation of students that don't have basic skills, like, where is that going to leave us in the future? That's not good for anyone. So
we're going to rely on ChatGPT. Sorry, to cut you off. Oh, I totally agree. Well, Dr. Brandi Tanner, this has been a really, really wonderful conversation. Where can people find you and your resources?
My website is youriepsource.com, and I'm on Facebook and Instagram, both youriepsource.com. So we've got a free guide that is available on my website for download. And then periodically I get some content out on social media. Like I said, I found that it's not my main channel, so I don't get on there as much as what I was before. But from time to time, we've got some interesting content there too. So you can follow on Facebook and Instagram.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. This has really been a pleasure talking to you.
You as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Empower LEP podcast. Episodes can be found at empowerlep.com. If you liked what you heard, please leave a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or if you have any questions for me, don't hesitate to connect. I would love to learn more. I can be found at Jana at empowerlep.com.